Hello everyone and welcome back to the Belgian Beer Brothers channel. Cedric here from Antwerp, and today we're going to talk about a rather special beer, and I know that I say this quite often, but in this case it is again true. There's something special about this beer, and even though it's brewed by a very young brewery, boy did I go down a rabbit hole researching this one. I'm gonna switch things up for once, and I'm gonna start with the beer and not the brewery. Why? Well, because it's just easier that way. I am gonna talk about this beer, and it was partially requested. It's called Grotten Santé, or Caves Cheers, and it is brewed by the Kazematten. These days it's known as the Yper City Brewery. Pardon me. But we will talk about where that name came from later on in this video. This beer, on the other hand, was actually a pleasant surprise. Well, maybe not the taste, we'll know that in about 15 minutes or so. But while researching this beer, I found out that the original recipe was developed by Pierre Celis, and some of you might have heard that name, but you will definitely have heard of this man's legacy, because Pierre Celis is the man that basically founded Hoegaarden, or Brewery De Glaas, the vault, for the Hoegaarden beer in 1966, and later on, when that got bought by back then Interbrew, now AB InBev, he used the money of that sale to move to Austin, Texas, where he also founded Celis Brewery, where he produced Celis White with his daughter. He did that since 1991. Now after that, Celis Brewery got bought by another major player, Miller, and Pierre actually came back to Belgium. Now, long story short, nowadays the name Celis Beer is in the hands of his daughter, and she is doing something with that again. Pierre unfortunately died, I believe, about 10-15 years ago. But before that, he helped the people at St. Bernardus Brewery with their Watu White, and he also developed Grottenbier, cave beer. Now, where did that beer get its name? It got its name from being aged in caves. And what is special about caves? There's actually a rather, the temperature remains rather constant. It's always between 11 and 12 degrees centigrade. So quite chilly, and not ideal to ferment beer, but to age beer in. They wanted to see what that did to the beer, and apparently it turned out quite great. They are still making it. At first, the beer was produced somewhere, and we'll talk about that later on. It was produced and then stored 16 meter underground at the, and I have to make sure not to butcher this, the Folle Le Cave, a double cave system in Orpe-Goche, or Orpe-Joche, near Hoegaarden, where Pierre grew up. Unfortunately, the necessary permits weren't renewed, or at least not in time, so they had to move out, and they moved it to the Marl Caves in Cannes, near Riemst. Slight change of plans. That wasn't 16 meters down, that was 42 meters below, and that remained in a constant 11 degrees as well. Now, starting from 2001, Grottenbier was brewed by Sint Bernardus in Watu. It was brewed with local spring water, and they added exotic spices to it, for which I'm very curious. Starting in 2014, the production moved to Kazematten in Yper, which is now the Yper City Brewery. They also changed the name to Grotten Santé, or Caves Cheers. Another specialty about this beer is that it's aged in the bottle, so re-fermented in the bottle, and the bottles are stored upside down in what they call pupitres. It's like the large A-shaped boards with holes in, and you might know that from classic champagne production. So Pierre actually snuck a peek at the champagne production and thought that might come in handy, and he started using that same technique. Of course, there are links to these breweries. Pierre helped with developing the recipe for Watu White by St. Bernardus, and that's where he met Hans de Pijper, CEO of St. Bernardus. That name will come back in a minute. Kazematten is a side project of said Hans. So the step from St. Bernardus to Kazematten was not that big. Now about these breweries, we are gonna talk about St. Bernardus another time, because otherwise we're gonna make this like a 45-minute video, and I do believe no one's waiting for that. Also, we are gonna talk about the St. Bernardus beers, so I might as well just take it up then. Kazematten, on the other hand, for us Belgian and Dutch people, or Dutch-speaking people, it's a very confusing name, because Kazematten literally translates to cheese mats, like a doormat made of cheese or something. A lot of people don't know where the word came from. I was one of those until recently, and many people actually think that it came from the rubber mats on which we age and ripen cheese, and that also happens in caves sometimes. So they thought, since this beer is aged in caves, and the location where the brewery is right now was also used to make and ripen cheese, it might be the etymology of the name. Nope. Apparently, and I had to look this up because I didn't know either, Kazematten is a fortified arched structure with slots from which guns are fired. And when you walk through West Flanders or the Belgian Ardennes, you see many of those arched structures, either man-made or, always man-made, but either a standalone building or built in caves. Those are called Kazematten, and apparently that name is also used for cannon firing holes in the side of ships' bows. Well, the more you know, I guess. Apparently the name came from Italian or Spanish casmata, and that was derived from the Byzantine chasmata. Now, in modern Greek, they also have the word chasma, which is also linked to the English chasm, for a narrow crack, which also refers to the slots where the guns are fired from. So we went full circle here. The brewery is currently located in 3 30 by 6 meter souterrains, like underground arched man-made cellars, let's say. And apparently these were built in 1680, 1685, somewhere around that, designed by the Vauban under Louis XIV or Louis XIV. They have seen many uses, and the first couple of centuries they actually housed a bakery. The bakery for the local garrisons that were stationed there. And let's say the last 100 years a lot changed. So in the First World War, it was taken over by British troops and they used it as an HQ. They put in a complete residency. Now, mind you, these 3 Kazematten aren't the only ones there. There are quite a lot of them. There's also a restaurant complex with 5 large halls, for example. So it's quite a complex. But World War One, British troops used it as an HQ. They put in a complete residency, and pardon me. They even put in a fully operational printing press. They found somewhere, they confiscated it and they put it in there, where they printed their satirical newspaper, Wipers Times, or Whippers Times. I believe it's pronounced Wipers Times. You might compare it with the modern Charlie Hebdo in France. Also a satirical newspaper with some cartoons and some jokes and stuff. Later on in World War II, the army didn't move in this time, but the people did. It was a very important hideout for the local people and for the local citizens. Between World War II and let's say 2000, 2006, this place has seen a lot of uses. There was a mushroom farm, an ice cream factory, also a cheese ripening hall. So yeah, not a crazy link there. But in 2013, Hans de Pijpere, back then CEO of Sint Bernardus Brewery, was actually looking to do something, with his daughter. He actually, his daughter started working in the brewery in St. Bernardus. She started way down at the ladder, but she implemented a lot of changes and she actually grew the brewery and future-proofed it. So, hey, great job, Julie, because thanks to Julie, we can still enjoy a lovely St. Bernardus Abt 12, amongst others. So Hans saw that Julie was taking up more responsibility and he decided maybe it's time for her or for us to do something of our own. Julie just moved back to Belgium and she bought a house with a barn. So Hans bought a 600 liter kit, a brewing kit, with stainless steel interior and a beautiful, beautiful copper jacket from the Old Bailey brew pub in Sint-Aloys-Winkel, and apparently that even was a setup of a former Duvelmoordgat CEO, although I couldn't find the resources for that. It's a story I read by Brandon Kearney. So, unfortunately, Julie's husband, also named Pierre, was planning on keeping cattle in the barn, and they compromised. Pierre could keep cattle and Julie and Hans went on the lookout for a cool location. Right about the same time, Rudy Gesquier, who was site manager of Rodenbach, and he's still nicknamed Mr. Rodenbach because he still works there. He travels the world promoting Rodenbach, and he is in some literature called the head brewer or the master brewer, but he is mainly site manager and head of the brewery. He grew up around this place, and while walking he found these 3 huge wooden doors, and I'm very much shortening the story right now. He saw 3 huge wooden doors, and this place was het houten paard, the wooden horse, and at the time it was empty. So he found these 3 30 by 6 meter arched cellars and thought, wow, wouldn't this be cool to do something in such a great location? Now, Hans and Rudy were both members of the same society, Society of East Flanders Brewers, and they had already met in 2011 and probably way back before, and they got to talking. Hans was looking for a location to put in the brewery, and he also realized that actually him and his daughter were working way too hard to do this alone, and Rudy had a location and wanted to do something with it. Being a head brewer, one and one makes two. Now, Rudy also called in his son, Maarten, and Maarten isn't just any other guy. Maarten is also a bioengineer, and back then was a postdoctoral researcher at the Royal University of Leuven. He was studying there, I believe, under awesome beer god Delvaux from Labo Delvaux. And I even believed he studied with the son of Frank Boom from Boomhuizen Brewery. So again, brewery world, very, very small world. But I digress. So in 2013, Rudy and Hans basically founded the Kazematten brewery and built the brewery inside these Kazematten. They took this old brew kit, they put in some CCTs, they had to put in all the rest as well, because, well, you might join forces and you might buy an old brewery. Unfortunately, Tautenpaard was a beautiful location, but had no resources whatsoever. So no running water, no pumps, no electricity, no gas, nothing at all. So they put in water, gas, electricity. They installed a steam kettle and a glycol compressor for the in-process heating and cooling. And they got to brewing. And somewhere in 2013, they also invited Koen Hugelier, who was in fact a former clown who performed at parties for both Hans and Rudy, according to the legends. But especially Koen studied to be a zytoloog, just like I am, under Rudy, and he once hired a brewery and brewed his own beer for some festivities called the Hugel, and he wanted to brew more. Since he already made contact with Rudy, Rudy asked him to come and help out, and together they brewed the first Kazematten beer, which is the Wiper's Times. I believe it was the blonde version, 6.2, 6.5%, and that was a success. Now in 2014, as I said, Hans brought het Grotte Bier by Pierre Celis to the Kazematten. I must admit, it is more fitting on that location as well. And they started brewing it there. They gave it a whole rebranding, and now it is home in Yper. Long story. They wanted the Kazematten to have an identity very much intertwined with the history of the location, and that's why they called the beers the Wiper's Times, after that newspaper from the Sherwood Foresters from the British Army. And they renamed this Grotten Santé and gave it this lovely label, which is actually a drawing of the brewery, of the Kazematten. I think it's absolutely beautiful, but you know that I'm a sucker for simple and historic. So I heard a lot about this beer. I heard it's beautiful, it's well made, it's genius, and knowing Pierre Celis, I believe that. So I have never been so curious in my life for a beer. So without further ado, let's have a taste. Normally, this beer has its own glass. It's a beautiful chalice. Think of the old Chimay or Westmalle glasses. But now I'm using my tasting glass because I don't have a Kazematten glass. Unfortunately, I do have a lovely branded bottle cap with the Kazematten logo. And now that I have some more room in my glass, I can add it. It is quite active, lovely. You see some damp coming from the bottle. Ooh, quite yeasty, spicy. Might I even say vinous? Honestly, I don't know which spices and herbs they've used, but the first thing that comes to mind is red wine and glue wine. So, and I don't mean that I smell cinnamon or something. Yeah, just this vinous red wine smell. So, for me, that's a very good start. I love that smell. Here we go. I'm gonna leave a little bit in. A lovely color again. It's actually reddish brown, even caramel colored, and some beautiful beige ivory foam, quite dense, although, no, scratch that, some large bubbles, but quite a lot is what I meant to say. And I do see a lot of bubbles purling up all around the beer, so it is very active still. Yeah, again, very vinous, a lot of glue wine. This should have been one of my winter beers. Yes, very winter markety. Let's have a taste. Oh my. Surprising. It also tastes quite vinous. It's quite thin in the mouthfeel. Not very sugary. It's very well fermented. A tiny bit yeasty in the back of the throat. Still get a lot of red wine. So might there be some tannins in there? Although it's not barrel aged, so it is rather sweet. I get a tiny hint of molasses, but mainly just the taste, so not the sticky part, not the thick quenching part. It is very thirst quenching. Yeah, definitely lovely. I get a few tastes in here that I can't even place. I'm thinking very Simon and Garfunkel, a bit of rosemary and thyme here. I love the spicy component. I love that it's a nice dark brown, well fermented, rather dry beer. I love the vinous component. I love the idea of tannins in there. Yeah, I think this is just awesome. And I actually think that with a production of about 750 hectoliters per annum of 6 beers, so let's say they make somewhere around 50 and 100 hectoliters of this beer, with that story, with that brewing process, and with this taste, that's a hit for me. even a tiny hint of licorice. But the fact that I can't pinpoint many flavors actually illustrates that this is a very well balanced stout beer. And it is, in my opinion, beautifully made. Now, of course, if you see the bill, the top men and women of Saint Bernardus, which makes a very beautiful beer as well, and Rodenbach, which is, like a household name. What could go wrong? So I am very, very, very curious for their other beers. This is the first one that I tried from them. I wasn't familiar with the brewery either, and I think I still have a bottle of Wipers Times in the cellar. That might come up a bit quicker than I anticipated. Yeah, absolutely lovely. About the verdict, let's score this beer. Solid 4, maybe even a tiny bit more, because it's just so complex and so beautiful. Let's make it a 4.25 maybe. I'll see what I do when I put it in Untapped. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Everyone, thanks so much for watching again. I'm very humbled by how you keep tuning in and keep watching these brew reviews. Patrick, I didn't forget to score this, and we will be talking about Cantillon in a while, and we are gonna meet up. And Mr. Raining on Your Parade, I forgot your real name, or I didn't know it in the first place. You asked about Kazematten. Hey, you requested I go digging, and I actually very much enjoyed this dig. So if you guys have any suggestions or requests, please leave them in the comments. I love digging into the history of these breweries, and honestly, I had a very hard time keeping this under 30 minutes. And I even left out a complete brewery, actually 2. So yeah, we are going to talk about the rest in a later video. I'm going to enjoy this a bit further. Thank you guys a lot, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers. Don't forget to like and subscribe.